Hi there, my name is Kyle,
And I'm Jess,
and welcome to our podcast, Departure from Reality.
where we discuss the books, movies, and TV shows that we love.
This podcast was inspired by the hours and hours the two of us have spent obsessing over these stories.
We don't consider ourselves authorities or experts of any kind when it comes to the worlds we dissect, just passionate fans who wanted a reason to record their conversations.
In our episode today, we will be discussing the first entry in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, The Fellowship of the Ring. This will include the original novel by JRR Tolkien, the movie adaptation by Peter Jackson, and the original score by Howard Shore.
It's probably safe to say that this series is what launched our obsession with epics. For those who haven't seen the movie or read the book, this episode will be full of spoilers.
So fair warning. Well, thanks for tuning in and listening to our first episode, everyone.
Hi, welcome.
So, as we said in our intro, this first episode is going to be about the Fellowship of the Ring, first book in the Lord of the Rings series. And to start, we'd just like to sort of talk about how we were first introduced to Lord of the Rings. It's been a part of both of our lives for a long, long time. I was about 7 years old, I think, when the first Peter Jackson film came out.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So for me, they've just kind of been a part of my life. You know, I watched them when I was very young. I watched them all as they, came out. And I really just kind of took them for granted. They were just, it was Lord of the Rings. Like Lord of the Rings was just always a part of who I was, because that was around the time I was starting to actually kind of develop a little bit of a personality, starting to recognize the things that I liked and didn't like.
Right.
And I liked Lord of the Rings. It was a lot of fun. I couldn't claim to understand a lot of it or like fully appreciate much of it at the time, but
I think that's a big thing with, growing up with something is you don't appreciate it for what it is. You just,
yeah.
I mean, it's there, it's been there for as long as I can remember.
You can't imagine what life would be like if you didn't have it. And I can't imagine a world without Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
It's just,
I feel the same.
It's shaped a lot of how I perceive entertainment, how I read books and experience fantasy and sci-fi. Just it
definitely does raise the bar.
It does, and it's incredible to me that it's as old as it is. Like, it's not.
I mean,
ancient.
We're celebrating the 20th anniversary of Return of the King this year.
Yeah, just the movies.
Yes,
and the books are.
And if time has showed us anything when it comes to films, they don't hold up well after about a decade. So the fact that they hold up this well just shows you how well done it is.
Yes. Yeah. But anyway, I first experienced it when I was 7. Jessica, what was your experience like?
So these movies, they first came out. The Fellowship would have been released December 2001. And I first watched it in January of 2002. I had never heard of it before. This was something new for me. And I was just going to the theater because, my brothers were going and family friends were taking us. Something to note, my dad passed away about a week to 2 before I first watched the movie. Our dad passed away. So that is probably a big reason for me why I resonated with it so quickly. But I loved the film. I sat there the whole time just not knowing that I could love something like this so much. I'd watched different kinds of movies that might have been similar, like war type movies with my dad or my brothers before. And I can't say I ever resonated with them as well as I did with this one. But I mean, it also helps that I was obsessed with Legolas, him and his long blonde hair. And I was a 14-year-old girl. Okay. From that moment on, I was absolutely obsessed with everything Lord of the Rings. I made my mom go out and buy me the books, and I started to read them. And over spring break that year in May, I finished them. I took every opportunity I had to read them. I found out when the movie was going to be released on VHS. That dates me a little bit, but whatever. And I saved up every penny I had from babysitting. And once it came out, I made my mom take me to Kmart and I bought that VHS movie, and I was so excited to watch it. But my mom had school that night. She's now a widow of 5 children. So she had to go to school to finish her degree. She took us to our grandma's that night, and I made my grandma sit and watch that movie with me. And she did. And she did not complain.
I'm sure she loved every minute of it.
She probably did love it. I mean, maybe she secretly went and watched the other movies without me when they were released.
I have a hard time picturing grandma sitting around enjoying Lord of the Rings, but
Frank, we're gonna go see a movie.
That's a dwarf, Frank.
Oh, I know this one. That's a hobbit. But anyway, I was just obsessed with Lord of the Rings after that. And I think a big reason was, our life wasn't so great at the time. I had a lot of new responsibilities on my shoulders. The older sister, we'd lost our father, and our mother was now out of the house a lot trying to finish her degree, and life wasn't super great. And so this was a real first experience for me of how a book can take you, a story, not just a book, a story can take you out of a place you're in and put you in another place. And for the time being, you feel a little bit better. And it kind of becomes an addiction, I guess, to seek out those stories that transport you to another world, because when the world you're in sucks, I mean, I don't know, what else are you gonna do? So sorry, that took a really dark turn. But yeah, I really like Lord of the Rings.
Yes, welcome to our podcast where we make every episode dark.
Yes.
It's going to be the theme. Please stick with us.
I'll try not to talk about my dead dad too much.
Just when we feel the urge, which is about every day. Anyway, no, we grew up on these books.
Yes, we did.
You being older than I was, you did have a stronger emotional connection to them than I did.
I mean, I had posters in my room. I made people buy me figurines for my birthday. I had like a collector's set of the books that nobody was allowed to open or read.
I think the way I kind of interpreted it from my experience at the time was Lord of the Rings is just one of those fun movies that people watch. You put it on, you have a good time. But my sister's the real fan. It's one of her favorite movies. She's even got the books. But then I'd go to school and I'd talk to kids my age about it, and I'd realize a lot of them haven't seen it. And I'm like, you've never seen Lord? What do you mean? Like you don't know what it is?
I forced this on my family.
Yeah, and so I started to realize that like I was sort of a part of something that not everyone had fully experienced, and I don't know. There was something about that kind of got me a bit more interested in looking into it. I don't know if that makes it sound genuine. It makes my interest in it sound genuine or not. But at the time, being as young as I was, that's just how I interpreted finding out that not everyone knew about this. I wanted to introduce it to people and talk to people about it. Yeah. So for me, for a long time before then, I took it for granted. It was just one of those things. It was just part of life. Lord of the Rings was just part of being who I was.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think a lot of people who grew up with it younger, like you did, probably feel the same way, Yep.
I think everyone I've spoken to about it has usually been just a few years older than me, and they were able to be like, that when the movies were coming out, they were either aware of the stories beforehand and were excited for the movies, or else like you, after the first one came out and they got hooked, they were on board for the other two and they were hooked and were watching it, looking for trailers and waiting for the next movie to come out. I wasn't really following that.
Don't worry, I was following it for you.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course, no problem.
And if those
we were there opening night to watch that movie.
If those movies were coming out nowadays, I would probably be just fanatically involved with all that. Like,
there's people out there who don't appreciate Lord of the Rings. They're just like, whatever. I mean, remembering and going back to these opening nights, there were lines around the corner to buy tickets, hoping that you get a seat. We had to wait in lines to like get in the theater, and we had to get there like an hour or more early just so we didn't sit like separate or very close to the screen. So these were very popular films, the times were sold out. I don't really see that in movies anymore.
It happens occasionally.
Yes, but like
big Marvel
that's
films.
How popular it was, lines around the corner. We waited in line to get a seat. Just remembering that, the nostalgia just comes back, and I would wait in those lines again.
Yeah, I don't blame you. How was it just that you were caught up in the thrill of the story when you were reading the books, or did you interpret the books differently from the movies when you first read them?
So I remember I read through them pretty fast for my age, thinking back on like because I haven't read them for a while. But thinking back on the language, 14 years old, I read those books and I got through them pretty fast for a 14-year-old. I remember thinking that the movies were done better and enjoying the movies a lot more than I enjoyed the book. And I remember reading it again in my 20s, like here I am aging myself again. It's been a while since I've been in my 20s, but feeling the same exact way as I did. That while the books and the story are there and I love it, it's the movies for me. I prefer the movies, and I can't say that about a lot of things. So this is one of those few things where I can say that I feel that the movie was adapted better than from the story of the book than most book to movie adaptations.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's easily, I can't say standard, because standard makes it feel like there are movies that have surpassed that. It is the goal for
right
book to movie adaptations.
Yeah.
Or book to live action adaptations, I should say.
Yeah. The gold standard.
Yes, it's the gold standard. There you go. That's the phrase I was looking for. Some adaptations have come really close. Some could probably be considered on par, but most fall short.
Yes.
And I think that's one small reason why the movies are so good 20 years later. They were adapted so well. They were
really
done so well for the generation they were being adapted for. And while the books are incredible, they weren't written for the year 2000. They were released in 1954.
Yeah.
The English language, it changes all the time. And in 5 decades, 4.5 decades, the language has changed quite a bit. Now, 7.5 decades or whatever. Yeah, language changes all the time. And the fact that 50 years later, it was adapted. I mean, the people who watch the movies and then go to the books, like you and me,
Mm-hmm.
I struggled to get into them as much as I did with the movies.
Mm-hmm.
First time I ever tried to get into them was when my first job, you and I were working together actually, and we decided to listen to the audiobooks since we worked in the same
Yes,
office.
I remember that. That was probably the last time I read the full series.
I enjoyed it because I at the time, because I loved going through and being like, oh, so that's how it was originally, like that's how this scene was originally written out. Like you seeing the connections between it and the adaptation, finding the things that they cut out, experiencing all the songs.
Oh my gosh, that is my favorite thing about audiobooks is that you can skip the damn songs. I'm sorry, I am not a fan. If you're a fan of the songs and you're like cursing my name right now, that's okay. We probably wouldn't be friends in real life. So that's fine. But I do not like the songs. The songs they sing, like Merry and Pippin sing a lot of songs, it's fun. Movies, it's cute. I like it. I have a really good time in the movies watching them sing their little songs when they're pretty much drunk,
Yeah.
It's fun. But reading it in a book is a different experience and I do not enjoy it.
And it's even worse when, I'm pretty sure his name is Rob Inglis, the original narrator.
Yeah.
It's even worse when he sings every single song with the same, like, the man's already. I don't want to bash Rob Inglis. I'm sure there's a lot of fans of him, a lot of fans of his original recording, but it wasn't for me. He already, like, by default, he already felt like he had kind of a dry, narrated voice, and then he would sing the songs, and every time he sang the songs, his voice would shift to this weird old vibrato, with like nasally vibrato, and it didn't improve the experience for me, especially when we got to Tom Bombadil.
Yes, I was just about to say that he's probably the reason I hate Tom Bombadil with a passion.
Which is also
I hate Tom Bombadil.
A hot take for a lot of really big book fans.
Yes, because there's a huge like group of people out there who are like disappointed that Tom Bombadil was not in like the Fellowship of the Ring, and I am so glad that he was not.
Yeah, I know Peter Jackson, I think, wanted to somehow include him, but he couldn't justify it with everything that he was
we never come back to him again, so he's irrelevant. I'm sorry, he is.
No, I agree with you. It's sad to say, but I mean, it doesn't feel like he serves much of a purpose in the story, at least from the perspective of the movies. Like, from the perspective of the books, trying to create a world that feels vast and lived in and full of things that, not everything revolves around the ring.
Yeah.
That's fair. And that gives that feel like there's this unknowable entity, God person living in this forest who is powerful enough to shrug off the effects of the ring, could probably even help them win the fight against Sauron, but is doing his own thing and has zero interest in that. Right. I appreciate that from a world building perspective. I just didn't like Tom Bombadil. I don't either. Did not want to hear about his damn boots or his the fact that he's got a really pretty wife.
I'm sure his wife, I can hear his song in my head.
He's a jolly fellow, Jessica.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for that.
and Goldberry is waiting.
You can take his jolliness and never mind.
Goldberry's got the patience of 1,000 saints. I don't know how she's still waiting. I would have left. She has to be a god on her own right.
I did leave. I never listen or even read those chapters. I always skip through Tom Bombadil. I cannot stand it.
Yeah,
though I did give it more of a chance when I listened to Andy Serkis narrate The Fellowship.
Yes, me too.
Recently. I haven't made it through all of the books, but I did listen to The Fellowship with him, and I gave it a little bit more of a chance, and he does a little bit better of a job.
Yeah.
Not making me hate Tom Bombadil so much. But I mean,
it's still
feelings
Tom.
are...
Still Tom Bombadil.
Thank you. Yes, it's still. Yes.
Yeah, I felt the same way. The last time I went through the books, I listened to the Andy Serkis recordings that he did over the pandemic. I loved his recordings. I got through all three.
Makes the songs a little bit more bearable.
The songs were actually kind of fun when he did it because they weren't always the same. They were still a little bit like, I'm not sure if I want to listen to a song right now. We were in the middle of something kind of good. Can I just get back to the story? But they were more palatable.
Yeah.
I think on the whole, I much prefer Andy Serkis's recording.
Oh, 100%. Especially when he does Gollum.
I wonder why he does such a good impression of Gollum.
It's crazy, right?
It sounds
like
exactly
spot on.
Like whoever did it in the movies, whoever that was.
Whoever played Gollum in the movies.
I remember when we did listen to the original Rob Inglis recordings, it feels bad to say this, but we got through books 1 and 2, but we never finished book 3 because we had a hard time getting through his voice.
Yeah.
It got to the point where we just were not feeling the story anymore. It had taken hours and hours to get to like the middle of book 3, and we're like, you know what? I
think a big problem with that is we were renting from the library, and it was taking a long time to get the CDs. So by the time that we got the third book, we were like, I'm over it. Like,
a lot of our enthusiasm was gone.
I'm done. So what we did was on our lunch breaks, we watched the extended versions of 1, 2, and 3 at my house in 30 to 45 minute increments every day.
We lived so close to where we worked.
That was really nice.
Yeah. It was painful to only watch such short snippets of the movies, but
hey, it was a really good month, okay?
It was a good month. It's crazy
we had something to look forward to every day for lunch.
It's crazy that it took a month to do that.
Exactly.
I mean, normally we can get through all 3 of those movies in a Saturday if we really dedicate ourselves.
I mean, before I had kids, absolutely.
Yeah.
I could do that. Life has changed a lot for me.
Yeah. The book and the movie start in different places. And the movie starts with Galadriel's summary of the lore, which is done very well. You know, summarizing thousands and thousands of years of lore for people who've potentially never even heard of these stories.
Yeah, it's probably my all-time favorite opener of any movie. I get goosebumps every time.
Yeah, for anyone listening who's also a big fan of the movies, you turn it on and Galadriel starts to speak, and it's just gut reflex to start quoting her. Like even in just your head, like I don't know if it's just the fact that the movies are so good or that everyone who likes the movies is as compulsive as we are.
Yeah.
But I know we've all seen the movies so many times that we can quote that shit by memory every time we turn it on.
Yes. And Chris my husband will be in the other room in his office, like just working. And all of a sudden he'll just hear me, quoting. He's like, "Are you watching that movie again? Don't you worry about it."
The books and the movie both come together when we get to the Shire. I love the Shire so much.
Me too. And the music that surrounds the Shire is, I think, what makes me love it even more.
Yes.
Because the music and the place together, it's home, you know? Like, it might not be my home, but, in my mind as a teenager, when I wanted to escape somewhere, the Shire is where I wanted to be. It was a safe place. It was a great place to be.
Comforting.
And that music, you hear it and you're instantly transported to to
just a simple trill of like 3 notes on a flute. Yep.
Exactly. That's all you need. You're in the Shire.
Just walking down the road to Bag End immediately.
And I love that we open with Bilbo. You know, he's finishing writing his book and he's telling us about the Shire and about hobbits in general.
Even though for those of us who went and saw the movie without knowing anything about the books, we'd never heard of The Hobbit, or at least most of us hadn't heard
about The Hobbit.
I didn't read The Hobbit until, years later. And so there's something still poetic about that, paying tribute to the story that came before. I mean, even though lore-wise, that's what should happen.
Absolutely.
I still love that they did that. I love that, it's in there. It's
a good way to show, I guess, how Peter Jackson really did stays so close to the lore of the show, and that
Yeah.
he really truly was a fan. The fact that he wanted to address what came before, even if it was just a short little snippet,
Yeah.
shows how much of a fan he really was.
And it feels, and on one hand, it feels kind of silly to say, like, I'm glad that they included this because, like, what else would they have done? But on the other hand, it's easy to think that any other person adapting this movie who's just some random director in Hollywood that's been given a script and told, I'll give you this much money to turn this into a movie,
Mhm.
and doesn't give two shits about the source material.
Yeah.
And like, there's so many other directors that would have just skipped all that and gone straight to, maybe started it right at the day of Bilbo's birthday.
Yeah.
Maybe never shown him writing There and Back Again. Not built up the Shire as we see it in Peter Jackson's adaptation.
Yeah.
Just
And I love how much they built this Shire for us. We might only be there for a short amount of time and then back again at the end for a short amount of time. But I feel like it drives home even more what the hobbits are leaving exactly.
Yeah.
Like the comfort and the security of this place. It's a haven from Middle Earth. It really is. It's untouched the entire time. We know that's not true in the books.
Yeah.
But for the movies, it's untouched the entire time. So I love how they build it up, because in our minds, this is the safe place we want these hobbits to basically end up getting back to.
Yeah.
And when they do, it's comforting to know that it was still here the whole time and that they can go back to it.
Yeah. When the goal of your journey is to get back home safely,
Mm-hmm.
there's something wholesome and just rewarding about that when it's paid off.
Exactly. Because isn't that like the goal of every single person, whether you're on a quest or not?
Mhm.
You leave your house to go to work in the morning. The goal is to make it home safely.
Yeah.
So
But there's still so many stories out there where, and I still love a lot of these stories, but there's so
Yes.
many stories out there where the hero steps out of their home and then some shit happens and their home burns down. And they
Exactly.
don't have a home to
And
return
that's what
to.
happens a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And so it's just one of
Luke
those.
Skywalker.
And it's exactly. And it's still an amazing story. So it's
Yes.
just different takes on it, you know?
Yes. And I think that's one thing that sets Lord of the Rings apart, because it has that comfort of the Shire always there. It's always our destination to get back there.
Yes.
To return home.
Yes.
You know, it's different from other stories, but that's a good thing. I love it so much. I love the Shire.
Me too.
If I could go anywhere in Middle Earth, 100% it would be the Shire. That, even knowing just how spectacular Minas Tirith would be, how daunting Mordor and Mount Doom and Barad-dûr would be to see in person, I would want to walk down the lanes of the Shire.
Oh, absolutely.
See Sam's fields of trees that he plants in the books. That's one of the things I wish they'd mentioned in the movies. The fact that he plants a bunch of elvish trees at the end of the third book. Just, I would love to go there and see this really beautiful Shire that he built back up.
We wouldn't have this story without Bilbo and his first adventure. So that's one reason why it is a good thing that it was mentioned. Because of his adventure, we now have this ring, and it's now passed to Frodo.
Yeah.
The story does revolve around these two characters because of the ring.
What are your thoughts on Frodo? How do you feel about Frodo?
So Frodo. Okay. In the book, I feel like I'm going to get like a lot of hate for this.
No, I don't think you will. I think there's some varying opinions in the community about Frodo.
Frodo's a little bitch.
In the books, specifically
in the books, I feel like he is a little bitch. I do not understand the attention and clout that follows him. Like, everybody is so excited to meet Frodo. Oh my gosh, you're Frodo. I'm an elf. Let's, talk to each other. Whatever. Like, I don't get it. Like, he's annoying.
He's a very impressive short person.
I guess so. Yeah. Who did, dragged his feet to leave his house. Like, and I get it. I totally get that. It's the Shire. Who the hell would want to leave the Shire,
Yeah,
but
it's too late to censor ourselves.
I know, right? Sorry, Mom. But I mean, I get a little where he's coming from. It's just kind of annoying because it continues to happen a lot throughout the beginning of the Fellowship, Yeah. But then you have in the movie version Frodo, and Elijah Wood does an amazing job portraying this character, putting a little more heart, I guess, into Frodo. And it's not to say that a hero is only good if he wants to leave and he wants to go on this journey. I don't think that's exactly what makes a hero good. Not everybody wants to go on a journey, but they still end up being heroes. And that's still a really good story. I just like how Frodo has a little more heart in the movies.
Yeah, I agree with that. The book version of Frodo, he definitely has moments where it feels like he's kind of unnecessarily, I don't want to say cruel, dismissive I think.
Yes.
I mean, I get that he was raised kind of wealthy, like he was
Yes, he
adopted
does
by-
have that entitled, pompous
Yes.
air to him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We don't feel that as much in the movies. In the
No.
movies, he just feels like another hobbit,
Yeah.
which I kind of love. Like, I don't know why Tolkien had to make Bilbo and Frodo the rich people in the Shire. Like, I get that's technically what would have happened after Bilbo returned with a chest full of gold.
Yes. Would he have turned pompous and raised a pompous little brat? I don't think so.
No, I don't think so either. I feel like that's one deviation from the source material that I can really appreciate
Absolutely.
in the adaptations. And it's slight because, I mean, Frodo in the books isn't a complete arrogant asshole the entire time. There are moments when it's like, really? Like, Sam's helping you out, dude. Why are you talking to Sam like that? Like, Sam's the reason you're going to get out of here.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's take a step back from that. Speaking of Sam, I feel like ever since the idea that Sam is the true hero of the story, it sort of became a larger public opinion, which, I mean, on a certain level, I agree with 100%. He is very much key to the success of the ring's destruction.
Yes, but he is not the only hero there.
He's not the sole hero. Sam by himself could not have destroyed the ring. Frodo by himself could not have destroyed the ring. And they do a good job of showing that in the movies.
Yes,
but I think there's a scene in the book that illustrates that very well, at least in terms of Frodo being unable to destroy the ring by himself. Because in book one of the first times he ever even holds the ring, Frodo suggests, why don't we just destroy it then? Why don't we melt it down and be rid of it or something? And Gandalf says, try it, throw it into the fire. And so Frodo tries. He goes to throw it into the fire and sticks it in his pocket. He moved with every intent of putting it into the fire, but his hand moved it into his pocket. From that first moment, we should have realized he would never have been able to drop it into Mount Doom.
Exactly. That's like a little sneak peek for us that he's not going to be able to destroy this ring.
It's such a clever bit of writing, and it's one of the reasons why I love Tolkien. I never fully appreciated Tolkien until on my most recent reread, got to that part, and I actually processed what he said. I was like, wait. He never could have destroyed it. He told us from the beginning he never could have destroyed it. That is insane. It blew my mind. And so from that moment on, I think my appreciation of Tolkien went up like 3 notches.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure I read it and I'm sure I caught it, when I was a teenager and in my 20s. I guess I just didn't put it together. And you brought that to my attention a few months ago. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're absolutely 100% right. And I wish that's something that they would have put in the book, because it would have driven home more that Frodo needed Sam. He needed him for the ending of the story.
And not just Sam. I mean, even with Sam's help, Sam couldn't have then taken the ring from Frodo and put it in.
Exactly.
They needed Gollum.
And that's where Gandalf says, my heart tells me that there's still a role that Gollum has to play for good or evil.
Yep.
And it's like, it's true. Like,
and that's why we put up with him.
Yes.
Gollum is a slog to deal with in the books. He's constantly whispering in Frodo's ear, and you're like, Frodo, are you seriously listening to this mofo? Like, I get that on some level you connect with him because you see how the ring's poisoned him and you worry that's going to happen to you. I get that. They show that in the movies too.
Yeah.
His sympathies for Gollum. But at least in the movies, I found Gollum more enjoyable because of Andy Serkis's performance. I mean, it's hard not to like.
Oh, that is who voiced himself.
Oh, sorry. Did I spoil that for you? Gollum is tough to get through in the books. In my own personal opinion, I loved his, the version of him in the more recent Andy Serkis narrations.
Yes,
for obvious reasons. Yeah, he's a tough antagonist to deal with because he's the
especially
antagonist
for Sam. Like he's out to get Sam like just from the start because Gollum knows if he separates them, it's easier for him to get the ring. He knows that because there's another thing right there that shows Frodo can't do any of this without Sam.
Yep.
Because he doesn't need Sam just to help him get the ring to throw the ring in or whatever. He needs him through this whole journey because the ring is literally weighing Frodo down. Like you were sort of implying there, if without Sam, Gollum would have killed Frodo long before they even reached the Black Gates. Yes, Frodo is getting weaker and weaker. The closer he gets to Mordor, the weaker he gets. So Gollum would have been able to take him out. Yeah, wouldn't have even had to lead him to Shelob. None of that. Just would have done it himself. Exactly. It needed all 3 of them. It needed that setup. And that's such clever writing. I love it. And they do such a good job of showing that in the movies too. And honestly, I think Sam might be one of the, not the only character, but one of the characters that transferred from the book to the movie like seamlessly, I feel.
That's fair. I feel like book Sam is slightly more servile than movie
That's
Sam.
true. A little
He
bit
calls
more.
him Master Frodo
Yes,
a lot of
so
the time.
yeah, it's nice that they just did Mr.
Frodo.
Mr.
There's a more
Frodo.
professional / friendly relationship with the two of them right off the bat. We even get to see them drinking in a pub together.
Exactly, and I like that. They have a little
encouraging
bit
him
of
to go talk
camaraderie
to Rosie
beforehand.
and
Yeah.
So there's a much healthier friendship relationship between the two of them right off the bat in the movies than there is in the books.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I agree. I think aside from that slight tweak, Sam's adaptation from book to movie does feel pretty seamless.
And Merry and Pippin, to me, sorry, in our notes we put Pippo. So we're going to talk about Merry and Pippo now.
I went down and capitalized Galadriel, but I didn't fix Pippo.
And yes, we are looking at notes here. Like, as much as we would like to just sit and have a conversation, you have no idea how many tangents we would go off on if we did that.
Yeah, if we didn't have notes, we'd still be talking about what was the first thing we talked about?
About how we came to enjoy the books and the movies.
Yeah, we probably would have gotten off topic and started talking about like Star Wars or
exactly. So yes, we're following notes so that way we can stay on topic for you, so we don't do tangents like we are right now.
Yes, so please forgive our poor segues as we switch from subtopic to subtopic.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get better as this goes along. But right now we're going to talk about Merry and Pippo.
My favorite characters.
So these aren't characters that went seamlessly from book to movie, in my opinion.
No.
And I love the changes that they made, and the friendship that they have is more obvious in the movies than it is in the books. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the books, you know this, but I feel like in the books, their friendship is because of Frodo.
It does kind of feel that way. Everyone's friends with Frodo.
Yeah.
And they just sort of start to interact with each other because of they sort of orbit Frodo.
Yeah.
Whereas in the movies, they already feel like a dynamic duo. Like the first time
and
we see them.
I love that. I love them getting into trouble with each other.
Exactly. First time we see them, they're stealing fireworks from Gandalf.
Yes.
Which is hilarious. And it's a great way to introduce these characters as troublemakers. Next time we see them, they're dancing in a pub singing together.
Exactly.
Which is great. They're just fun, carefree characters.
There are comic relief, and every story needs characters like this.
Yes.
That just start off as goofy characters that you laugh about, but grow to be these characters. They show such heart and courage, and you just love them so much. Like they have this unexpected change in them.
That said, I do like both versions of the characters. I do.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yes.
Because the growth that both characters go through, that's taken fairly seamlessly, I feel, from the books. They both go through the same level of growth from sort of young, inexperienced, slightly goofy hobbits to men that have been in war and experienced death and are kind of sobered by that.
Yep.
In both versions, they go through that. The difference in the books that I kind of appreciated because it was, I got to experience these characters in a new way, was watching the two of them grow from friends of a friend to actual friends, to relying on each other as they travel together.
And I think for a book, that's perfect because like we've talked about before, we have more time with books.
Yes, exactly.
So we have more chance for character development like this. But when it comes to movies, there's not that much time. Even though I would sit and watch a 10-hour version of Fellowship of the Ring, we don't have that luxury.
Don't lie. You would watch a 20-hour version, or you just, if it could just be life and you just turned on Fellowship of the Ring for the day, and that was it, you would do it. I would do it.
You're absolutely right. 100%.
Anyone who's listened to this far into the podcast would probably do it. Either that or they are family and or friends and just want to listen to us talk, which I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much. So funny. But yes, so it's how they changed it up for the movie was good because we didn't have a lot of time to watch these characters grow into friends and then also grow into men, basically.
Yeah.
So it was nice to see them already be friends so we could watch these characters. It also had more of an impact for me when they were separated in The Return of the King. Pippin had to go off with Gandalf and Merry went with Rohan. And so it made even more of an impact when they were separated. I don't know. I like it.
Yeah, it was done very well.
Which brings us on to Gandalf.
Gandalf. So I don't know if you knew this. I didn't know this. Even after my most recent re-listen to the audiobooks, I didn't pick up on the fact that Gandalf is technically, I think his canonical height in the books is, I think, 5'8".
Wait, what?
Yeah, he's a short mofo.
Well, then that's something that I like that they changed.
Yeah, in drawings where they stay true to the characters' descriptions of the characters from the books, it is very, very strange to see him be dwarfed by Aragorn. Like, I get that Aragorn is one of the Dunedain and they're supposed to be much taller than normal men.
Yeah.
That's fine. But it feels wrong to see him stand a head taller than Gandalf.
And that's because we grew up watching the movies first.
Yes, and
so those take precedent in our mind.
Exactly.
So I'm sure somebody who grew up reading the book and then watched the movie was like, what the hell? He's huge.
Yeah, for us, Ian McKellen and his just towering figure as he plays Gandalf. I mean, Ian McKellen, I don't even know how tall Ian McKellen is, but they might have actually, I don't know, that he just sort of expresses height when he's on screen. Granted,
I think it's the his presence in general. Like, he's just he's obviously very commanding when he speaks.
I mean, in terms of acting, he came from the stage, so I'm sure there's a bit of that as well. Like him bringing some of his skill from the stage. It could also partially be because first time we see him, he's surrounded by short people. So I'm not going to lie, there might be a bit of impression there in our minds from he's just surrounded by these people that are half his height for the first 30 minutes of the movie. And then when we see him later on, it's just like, oh, well, Gandalf's tall. We're not even like really measuring him up to Legolas and Aragorn and Boromir. He's just tall.
It's fun to see a picture of him side by side with his two stunt doubles, because he's got a stunt double who's his same size, his like same height, and then he's got a stunt double who's the height of Gandalf, next to the hobbits. And the guy towers over him.
I forgot about this.
Yes.
Hilarious.
I can't remember which one I was watching. I think it was Return of the King I was watching, and there was a scene and I was like, that has to be a stunt double. And I was like, did he have an extra tall stunt double? And I looked it up and he did. And that's when I was like,
Absolutely
I first figured it out. Cannot remember the scene. I'm gonna have to remember what scene that was.
Man, I'd completely forgotten that they had a scale modeled stunt double for I mean, the way they shot those height difference scenes were very clever.
I mean, immediately that they use that like tall stunt double when Frodo and Gandalf are riding into the Shire, and you have a backward glance.
Yeah, when you're seeing them
sitting
behind,
next to each other. Yeah. And that's like a child sitting next to this tall
massive
man.
Human being.
Who's like almost 7 foot tall.
Yeah. But the more clever bits of shooting were, I mean, I'm sure most of the people who are huge fans of the movies have watched the behind the scenes, but if you haven't, you really ought to check them out. The behind the scenes for Fellowship, they go into how they shot the perspective sequences to show the height difference between Gandalf and the hobbits. And quite often they would have models that were bigger for the hobbits to handle and smaller for Gandalf to handle to make them look like these are the same objects but being held by two completely different sized people. Yeah. But in the carriage, when we're seeing Gandalf and Frodo from the face on and we need to have the actual actors there rather than scale doubles, the way they did it was very clever with having the wagon basically be split in half. Oh, yeah. And having Frodo's seat pushed further back from Gandalf's. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can't imagine how first off, I'm not an actor to begin with, but having to then act with someone, but not being able to meet their eyes, but having to pretend that
you're meeting their eyes. Yeah, I didn't even think of that. That's clever. That's some good acting right there.
I mean, it has to take like practice after practice to train yourself to know where you need to look. Yeah, because all you can see is probably at most out of the corner of your eye for Gandalf. Yeah. When you're looking off to your right, you can barely see where Frodo is.
And it's not like the carriage, the wagon is standing still. They're moving along. Yeah. So it's not like the director's like, look at this point and you look at this point, every time you look at each other. Yeah, so there's no points for them to look at.
Yeah. So the way they did that is incredible. There's so many fun stories like that from behind the scenes of how they shot these films.
Yeah. I love Gandalf. I love his little quotes that he gives. Like when Frodo is like, I wish the ring had never come to me.
When they're in Moria.
Yeah, and he's like, so do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we must decide is what to do with the time that is given us. And oh man, it gets me every time.
Yep. It's lines like that sort of sell to us just how important Gandalf is to the characters in the Fellowship.
Yeah.
And even though we're only with Gandalf the Grey for half of the first movie's journey, a little over half.
Yeah.
It still hits us when he dies, especially on rewatches. I mean,
oh yes.
I mean, I can't remember how I felt the first time I watched it. I was 7 freaking years old. But yeah,
But that's the thing. When Gandalf the Grey dies, Gandalf the Grey dies. That
Yes.
personality is now gone. It's like when the Doctor dies. We know where Doctor Who, if
Yes,
you don't
Doctor
know who
Who,
I'm talking about. Like
not just our personal physician. I mean, yeah.
Exactly. When the Doctor regenerates, we're literally losing that personality, you know?
Yes.
So when Gandalf the Grey, he dies, we lost that personality. When he comes back as Gandalf the White, the completely different Gandalf.
Yeah, which is another thing I didn't appreciate when I was younger.
Me either.
I never appreciated the differences between the two. I just thought, I think on some level I appreciated that Gandalf was more stern.
Yeah.
But there are moments when Gandalf the Grey is kind of stern as well, like when he's rebuking Pippin for making a noise when they're in Moria,
Yeah.
or scolding Merry and Pippin
Yes.
after they blew up his fireworks.
And making them wash dishes.
Yes.
I love that little touch.
Yeah, so
it's not even his party, but you're going to wash dishes.
Yep. Yeah, so taking moments like that and seeing how Gandalf the White acts, it feels like it's the same character when you're that young and you're not really thinking about it. But
yes.
now that we're older and we can appreciate that this really is a different person. Like him changing roles as a wizard to the white instead of the gray has changed who he is. Like and there's a lot of lore reasons for that as well, like the meaning
I don't want to get into it too much because we're going to obviously one day talk about the Two Towers, which is where that's covered. But I mean, he does talk about how after he does kind of die, I mean, can a part of a god, like basically a god, even die?
Mm-hmm.
Like how he passes like in and out of time and days turn into, I can't remember exactly the verbiage, but he talks about how
something, at least I'm going off the movies now. He said, I think he said something like a single moment was as long as a life age of the earth.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And
so like, think about that. He, like before he was sent back because his task had not yet been finished, before they sent him back to Middle Earth, he was out there for who knows how many thousands millennia, you know, that he was out there.
Yeah.
So of course his personality is going to change. Of course he's not going to be Gandalf the White anymore. It makes sense. Yeah. It just sucks.
Yep. And I'm looking forward to when we do a Doctor Who episode, because now you've got me thinking about David Tennant's exit, and that even just in passing makes me want to tear up a little bit. So yeah, it's sad losing a character, even when that character comes back a little bit different.
Exactly. You're just not ready for them to go.
Yeah. In the moment we lose Gandalf, we feel that pain, but they managed to maintain a level of comfort throughout the entire journey.
Yeah.
By sort of assigning that role to certain characters.
Oh, yeah.
And in the moment after Gandalf dies, that role is kind of taken up by Aragorn. Aragorn sort of fully steps into the leader of the Fellowship. Like he was in a way the leader, but with Gandalf alive.
I feel like when Gandalf was alive, Aragorn was very overshadowed. He's not a character, when you think of the Fellowship together, he's not a character you go back and think of.
Yeah. He's
kind of overshadowed in those moments.
Yeah.
And when Gandalf dies, he's not so much overshadowed anymore. This character's now come out to play.
Yeah. And after he dies, the strength that he puts forward, like he's known Gandalf for years, so it has to hit him hard. I mean, we get a better sense of that in the books. Yeah. The fact that he's known Gandalf for a long time, like they work together on certain things.
Even most recently, hunting Gollum.
Yep. They spent quite a while hunting Gollum. So yeah, he knows Gandalf. He is obviously devastated by the loss of this man. I mean, and not only that, but Gandalf was basically acting as their leader. And so I feel like anyone, even someone with as much natural leadership ability as Aragorn, it probably feels a little bit daunted knowing that they've just been thrust into the role of the group's leader.
Oh, yeah.
So there's probably, quite a bit of emotion going on in his head, but he didn't let any of that show. The fact that he got them all out of Moria, he got them up and moving and away from the danger and continuing on their trek. There's a level of comfort in that, knowing that there's still some semblance of control being taken.
Yeah.
Like even in a moment when it feels like we've lost all control, we've lost everything, the fact that someone like Aragorn is willing to step up, it kept the Fellowship moving. It kept us moving.
We needed someone to yes, we're in our grief right now,
but we need to get up and go because we're going to be hunted pretty soon.
And I feel like that's Aragorn's journey. Every time he makes a step forward on his personal arc, it's him stepping forward and claiming more responsibility. He does that after Gandalf dies.
Mm-hmm.
He does that after Sam and Frodo set off on their own.
That's right.
He does that. When's the next time he does that? He does it multiple times. I'm pretty sure he does it during the Battle of Helm's Deep at one point. He definitely does it when they get to Minas Tirith, and he finally steps up to be king, which is something he wasn't sure he wanted to do in the first place. Oh, when they go to is it the City of the Dead or when they go to
into the mountain, basically
into the mountains,
under the mountain,
yeah. When he steps up to do that, that's another moment when he claims more responsibility, because that's when he, in the movie anyway, when he takes up the sword.
Yeah, that's right.
In the book, he takes up the sword a lot sooner, but that's beside the point. So I feel like that's Aragorn's journey, accepting responsibility step by step until he takes on the mantle of king.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. I love that bit of who he is.
I feel like it's very like true to real life. When you're in a group of people, somebody is always going to be the leader, and somebody's always going to step up and be the leader. And people are just either going to accept it or not. But for the most part, people just accept when somebody steps up to lead them. And so I don't know. I just feel like those kind of people, like they know who they are because they do it, And Aragorn's just one of those people that he just knows. I don't know. He just stepped up.
I think on some level, he knew that's who he was. I mean, he's known for a long time that he was, Isildur's heir, and he's struggled with that knowledge for most of his life, I feel like.
Well, honestly, they stepped out of Moria, and he probably did like a quick okay, so we've lost our leader. Now all we have is Legolas of the Woodland Realm.
Dude doesn't even have a last name.
I know, so sad. And we have Gimli. And then we have Boromir, and we've got a bunch of hobbits.
Yeah.
So I don't know who's gonna step up, but it's probably gonna be me. So I should probably just do something real quick. I mean, Boromir, I guess could have been a leader, but it was clear Boromir wanted to let the hobbits sit and cry for a little bit, which is not what they needed to do. So he's like, okay, we need to get moving, guys.
Yeah, and I feel like Aragorn could have had a moment like that where he inventoried basically who they had left, who was capable to step up, and then chose to step up himself. But I think on another level, it was probably just instinctive.
I think it was. It really was, because we have Boromir, who's compassionate, and he wanted to let them, just sulk for a minute, cry and feel it. And so he's the compassionate companion. And so, we need someone with some tough love. It sucks what's happening right now, but we're gonna have to feel it later. We got to get moving. Legolas
is an elf, and being as long lived as an elf, he's probably more willing to just take his time, process what's happening.
Exactly.
He's time to him isn't a commodity. Am I saying that right? It's not
the same for him as it is for everybody else, because he's probably already lived hundreds and hundreds of years.
Yeah. So he's not in the biggest of rushes right
exactly now. Because a couple minutes to him is absolutely nothing. And then we have Gimli, who has grief for Gandalf, but more so for what he just found out in Moria. Like some of his kin are dead.
And overall, Gimli's very hot-headed. I mean, Gimli is a wonderful character. He's a good. I almost said man. He's a good dwarf. he is very.
But that's what makes everybody in the Fellowship that's what makes it such a good fellowship, is because of all the different types of personalities that bring it together. That's what makes it work.
Yes, absolutely. Speaking of the various personalities, I feel like we have to talk a little bit about Boromir.
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of hate for Boromir.
There is, and
it's not right. We gotta fix it.
I feel like that there have to be people out there like us who see, the good in Boromir, who appreciate that he is a good man.
We're gonna bring it to light.
And we're gonna try. Boromir is a good guy and doesn't deserve the hate he got. Thank you for tuning into the podcast. We'll see you next week.
We've changed your lives.
No, Boromir he's such a complex character.
Yeah.
And for a character that we only get to be a part of in one book and one movie, not counting a flashback and the third movie, we get a lot of depth and a lot of really strong character moments out of this one person.
Absolutely. When I think of the Fellowship, Boromir to me plays such a strong
moment in my flashbacks of the Fellowship. He stands out to me even more than Aragorn does. And that's not because the ring is calling to him more so than Aragorn. It's because of how kind he is with the hobbits. Like, they're essentially children to these, you know, these tall humans, even though they're probably older than Boromir.
I think Merry and Pippin are probably about the same age as Boromir.
Okay.
I think Pippin might be a little bit younger, but yeah.
But their mentality, they're a little bit younger. They really are.
Yeah.
But I mean, he plays with them, you know, he teaches them the sword and then they tackle him to the ground and he just kind of lets it happen, you know?
Yep.
He's the one who sticks up for them when they can't go through the mountains because of all the snow. He's like, the hobbits are going to die. You know, he's the one who stands up and sticks up for them. After Moria, when they're just, you know, so distraught, he's like, let them have this moment for pity's sake. Like, he's again trying to stand up for them, even if in this moment it's not going to work out. He's again standing up for them. Yeah. And then right before he tries to take the ring from Frodo, he's out there gathering wood for everybody. So they can have a fire. Somebody's got to do it. Maybe it was his job, or maybe he just took the initiative, but he was out there gathering wood and he stumbles across Frodo and he's like, you know, none of us should be out here alone, you know, least of all you. And his advice was coming from, I believe, a good place. I don't think the ring had yet taken over him in that moment. I believe he was just telling him, you know, it's not safe out here. You should probably get back to where it's safe. So I look at him as the caretaker of the Fellowship. He's the one who is looking out for everybody's, I don't know, emotional and mental well-being as well as physical. If it wasn't for the damn ring and its power, he probably could have gotten Frodo to Mount Doom to throw that in because he's such a good caretaker. Yep.
And he's very familiar with Mordor just from living next to it. So he could have potentially been an asset in Mordor. We don't know. This is all speculation, but
you just said it yourself. He's lived so close to Mordor his entire life. I feel like that is one of the biggest reasons the ring has so much power over him.
Yeah, he spent his entire life, you know, growing up with the knowledge that Gondor and Minas Tirith in particular is the rock that the storm of Mordor breaks against. That without them, Middle Earth would be doomed. That is something.
By them are their lands kept safe.
Exactly. Like, to him, it's a core tenet of who he is that Gondor protects all of Middle Earth. Without them, Middle Earth is in ruins, basically. But a huge part of who he is centered in a desire to defeat Sauron, to defeat the powers of Mordor.
Exactly.
And so he's looking for any opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
He doesn't fully understand the ring.
No, there's no way anybody does. It's been lost for thousands of years.
And the ring plays on that.
Yes.
Because that's what the ring is. That's what the ring does. It's nefarious, and it pulls the thoughts that we keep deep and dark inside. It pulled on those strings in Boromir. It saw that he...
And we just established that he's a caretaker, which means that he's also going to be kind of a people pleaser. He's going to want to do what makes people happy, basically, which means his father asked him to bring him back this mighty gift.
Yes.
And so that's going to play on his emotions even more. He wants to please his father. He loves his father. You know, even though his father is a complete jerk to his brother, he still loves his father. Yeah. And so he wants to do this to please his father because he thinks it'll help us defeat the enemy. Yes. So all of this plays into the role of how the ring manipulates him and starts to prey on him. And I feel like the ring puts most of its power and focus into Boromir. And it's powerful. Like, it's got Sauron's power in it. It's, for all intents and purposes, it's Sauron. Yeah. And so that's a powerful thing to try and overcome. So I do not think he's at fault.
No, not at all. These moments when the ring takes control of him and provokes him into anything from an outburst like he gives during the Council of Elrond to him trying to physically take the ring from Frodo at the end before Frodo sets off on his own. All of those moments, the people who judge Boromir a bit too harshly, I don't think they're fully appreciating that he's not in control.
Exactly.
Maybe on some level they are, and they still blame him for those moments, which I don't understand and I don't agree with. I feel like he's absolutely being manipulated by an outside force, seeing as his intentions, his true character is honest and pure and good, is actually like he actually does care about the well-being of his fellow fellowship members.
Yeah.
I think all of that needs to be taken into account. The fact that
it does.
the
How he
person's
lived his
intent.
life when he was not being manipulated and pulled by the ring, that should be taken into account more than the moments where a strong, powerful force was basically taking over his mind.
Yeah, the scene when he tries to take the ring from Frodo, the bit right before the ring takes control of him and he's collecting wood and he says, like you were saying, he says to Frodo, none of us should be on our own, least of all you. They kind of, in that scene in the movie, the eerie music kind of starts to play before the ring takes control of him.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like a lot of people have interpreted his actions in that scene as being nefarious, as him having gone off to try and get a moment alone.
It doesn't help that when they asked where Frodo was, they went to Boromir's stuff as well. Like they panned over there to see that he's not with the Fellowship either.
Yeah. But I think we're supposed to be seeing that scene through Frodo's perspective, and Frodo also being manipulated by the ring is immediately suspicious of Boromir.
Yes, because Galadriel just said that he will try and take the ring.
Yeah.
So
the ring,
who I speak.
Yeah, even if the ring isn't directly controlling him like it's directly controlling Boromir in that moment to try and take the ring, I think the ring creating these negative emotions in Frodo just passively creates a level of suspicion in him. And so we see the scene through Frodo's eyes as soon as he sees Boromir out there, even with Boromir being genuine, he doesn't see it that way.
Yeah.
And so he takes a step back. He says, get away from me. And then that's when the ring takes over Boromir.
Yeah.
And the shame that Boromir feels right after Frodo's gone and he realizes what he's done. I mean, I don't know how anyone who judges Boromir harshly can see that scene in the movie.
It's tearing him apart. You can see how anguished he is in that moment.
Yeah.
And not 10 minutes later, basically sacrifices himself to save two hobbits.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and he admits, granted on his deathbed, but he admits to his own weakness.
Yep.
When he's talking to Aragorn right before he dies, when Aragorn says that he lets Frodo go, he tells him, then you did what I could not. He admits that he wasn't strong enough.
Exactly.
He knows where he was weak. And I mean, that takes, even though he was dying, you could claim that him being just about to die makes that kind of a confession easier to make. But even then, that takes a level of strength of character.
Think about it. These are the last words anybody's going to hear out of his mouth. Yeah. And he's admitting to weakness.
Yeah.
Still, even people after they die, they want to be remembered as someone great, not somebody who was weak. But he still admitted, I tried to take the ring from Frodo.
Mm-hmm. Not just admitting to weakness. This is the son of a steward of one of the greatest cities on the planet. He is a prince in his own right.
Yeah.
And the fact that he's able to admit to something so embarrassing.
Yeah. I
mean, it really does show a strength of character for him.
And he's probably still feeling that guilt and that anguish over it too. And it's probably more of like, I still can't believe I did this. Like I tried to take the ring from Frodo. Like in his mind, he's probably still like, I can't believe this has happening. Like all of this has happened. Like he's probably in shock.
Yeah. And I think another probably slightly smaller reason why some people don't like Boromir is his relationship with Aragorn.
Yeah.
The very first time the two of them meet, Aragorn is sitting in an alcove reading by the ruins of Narsil.
Yeah.
And Boromir walks up and he sees the blade and he picks it up, cuts his finger and drops it. This is how it's done in the movies. I don't remember if that's how it's done in the books. I don't think it is. But it's a good introduction of these two characters and their feelings towards each other. Yes.
When I first saw this, and even for years, I thought that it was very rude and disrespectful of Boromir to just drop the sword and walk away. I'm like, how arrogant and prideful can you be? Pick it up. Yeah. But looking back, he was probably embarrassed. Yeah. He cut himself on this sword.
Yep.
And then it fell.
Yep.
And there's a man like he doesn't know who this man is, but there he is sitting, and he's probably like super embarrassed, and he's like, I'm just gonna leave now.
Yeah, this like I said
it's
before,
like he's probably pure panic at that point.
He's basically a prince of men, and just had several moments of just pure clumsiness and just foolishness. What else do? You go back and try again and potentially drop it and make an even bigger fool of yourself.
Exactly. So he did. I don't
Probably
know.
what
People
most
have
of us
fight
would
or
have done.
flight reflexes and responses in certain moments. And that moment for him, he needed to get out of there.
Yeah, he did probably what most of us would have done after having made a fool of ourselves twice in a row. Yeah, we just left.
And also when we are introduced to him in the Council of Elrond, And he's like, Gondor has no king, and Gondor needs no king.
Yeah.
You know, and I know a lot of people hate that too.
Towards Aragorn at that point.
Yes, we already have a relationship with Aragorn.
And so to have someone be like, Gondor has no king, Gondor needs no king, like, who the hell are you talking about my boy like that? You
right?
know, we get all up in arms.
Like, if he's supposed to be your king, he is supposed to be your king. Bend the knee.
Yeah.
You know, but
I don't think any of us in that moment stop and try to take that scene from Boromir's perspective.
Yeah.
Like I've said like 3 times now, he is basically a prince. His father is the ruler of Gondor.
And how many years has Gondor been protecting Middle-earth from the enemy without a king?
Yes. And to all of a sudden have someone come forward who everyone around him is saying is your rightful king and you owe him your allegiance.
Yeah, no, screw that. Like
what
why?
The hell do you
What has
mean?
he done for our people? What has he done for Middle-earth?
It's like, I owe him my allegiance? Where has he been?
Exactly.
What has he done to earn my allegiance?
Exactly.
Gondor has no king. Gondor needs no king. From that perspective, I feel it's very, very justified. His indignity in that moment is absolutely justified.
Yes, the last several times I've watched the movie with this new perspective, because yes, it's taken me years to come to this perspective.
Yeah.
But yeah, the last several times I've watched it, I'm just like right there. I'm like, you're right. You tell him, man. I mean, if he wants to be your king, he's going to have to earn his place.
Yep.
Like, you don't just get allegiance just because.
100%.
And I do feel like he ends up earning his place as king of Gondor by, you know, basically helping save the world.
Yeah, but I mean, we've also kind of talked about that. The way his story progresses with him gradually claiming more responsibility.
Exactly.
Him starting off not wanting anything to do with Gondor and ending up being king. It's done very well. Him slowly accepting that mantle. Yeah, with his relationship with Boromir, the growth there is done very well. It's very subtle. We start with the two of them being indifferent towards each other. We immediately build up a bit of animosity in the Council of Elrond. Then they both join the Fellowship. So I would imagine there's an undercurrent of respect from both of them for the other to have volunteered for a journey like this.
Absolutely.
I can only imagine that they both have a bit of respect for the other. But I think Aragorn, from the moment that they set out, harbors a bit of suspicion towards Boromir because
he immediately wanted it. Let's use it.
Yeah, and I think he naturally suspects that all men are frail when it comes to resisting the powers of Sauron.
Can we talk about that for a minute?
Yes.
Okay, so Elrond says the same thing to Gandalf. He's like, you know, men are weak. I was there, you know, when the power or strength of men fell.
Yes.
And he talks about Isildur not casting the ring in. This really bothers me. This whole thing in books about how men are so weak. It drives me nuts because in the hands of Isildur, the ring just wasn't destroyed.
Yeah.
Sauron didn't gain his power back. You know, there wasn't this huge new great dark lord. It was just a ring held by a man. And yes, it sucked because it didn't end Sauron, but it was just a ring being held by a man. But if Gandalf or Galadriel or somebody else with great power were to just touch the ring, who knows what kind of devastation would take place.
Yeah.
But men are weak.
Yep. It's fun to speculate what could happen if any of those incredibly powerful characters were to have taken up the ring, but it does feel on one level to be a little bit unfair the way they treat men in these stories, like the human race.
Yeah, because I would like to have seen Elrond take that ring and throw it into the fire.
Yeah, we never see an elf pick up the ring. Maybe maybe that's because all elves would have a similar reaction to what Galadriel would have had, but I don't think all elves are on the same level of power as Galadriel.
Yeah, probably not. But I would assume that Elrond's at least pretty close.
He's probably as close as any normal elf could be. I mean, I don't think he's had his ring of power for quite as long. Yeah. I think the ring Elrond has was Gil-galad's at first. I think. Okay. I don't fully remember. I could be butchering the lore. But either way, I'm pretty sure he hasn't had it nearly as long as Galadriel. And even without the rings, Galadriel just, I don't know much about her, but she just seems more powerful just at a base value.
Yeah, she does.
Yeah, I doubt it would have had the same effect if Elrond would have taken the ring. But it would have been interesting to see if he would have been able to throw it into Mount Doom. I know when I was younger, part of me was like, okay, but just take the ring from him. Yeah. Like, Isildur, throw it in. Like, you push him in. You're standing right there. Do it. Like, what's going on?
I mean, and as like terrible as it sounds, did he not have a sword?
Yeah.
Or a knife?
Like you
or
were there
2 hands to shove them.
3,000 years ago, and the strength of men. What about the strength of elves?
Yeah, I'm sorry. You could have taken him down.
Like, aren't elves supposed to be pragmatic?
And if you couldn't touch it, you could have like forced him.
Yeah.
Like you could have grabbed
I've
his
seen
hand and helped him chuck it.
That, or I've seen elves do some pretty incredible jumping kicks.
Right?
Like you got a lot of options here, buddy boy. What happened to the strength of elves that day? All right.
Exactly.
We want to talk about like, the strength of a race
You
failing.
literally watched him walk out. You were right there with him and the ring in Mount Doom, at the heart of Mount Doom.
Yes.
And you watched him walk out.
Yeah.
So don't talk about men.
Yeah.
You had options. Even if you stained your hands, you had options.
Yeah. All this said, I love Elrond.
I love Elrond too. I think he's great.
He's a really good character.
He is a great character.
Yes, it's a very common thing in fantasy that men are just weak to the powers of evil or whatever.
But going back to Boromir and Aragorn, I know we just got off on a tangent there.
Yeah, so Aragorn just naturally has this idea that men are weak to the powers of evil, which they are, but that lends him, a greater level of suspicion towards Boromir.
Yeah.
And so he doesn't immediately trust him. And it takes a while for him to gain any sort of trust towards him. And I don't think he fully appreciates what he has in Boromir until Boromir is dying.
And honestly, I think that this mistrust of Boromir and the suspicion that he has is one of the things that might save him from the ring's power, because he's so focused on making sure Boromir doesn't take the ring.
Yeah.
That I feel like the ring can't really get in to manipulate his thoughts or his feelings and emotions,
It's true. We see the rings being so focused on Boromir throughout the entire first book, even though it's within close proximity of 2 men. Yeah, we could make the argument that Aragorn has just a natural higher level of resistance towards it. I mean, he even, in the moment when Frodo offers him the ring right before he leaves, Aragorn does resist and send him on his way. I would have followed you into the very fires of Mordor.
But still, even in that moment, he was so focused on Boromir. Where is the ring? I still think his thoughts were so focused on Boromir. He's kind of like, and this is not to downplay his strength. He's clearly he has his strengths but I do think that
without Boromir, the ring would have been able to focus on Aragorn more.
I do think so.
Yes.
And I don't know if it would have played out the way that everybody seems to think it would.
Yeah. Boromir was definitely the whipping boy for the ring. The ring poured a lot of its focus into Boromir in book 1. I don't think Boromir gets enough credit for that, because I mean that's
a sucky position to be in.
It really is.
Sauron is focused on you. That sucks.
Even through all that, we get to see a bit of growth from Boromir. We see him specifically in terms of how he perceives Aragorn. Aragorn remains suspicious of Boromir practically up until the end, but we get to see Boromir's perception of Aragorn shift gradually throughout. It starts with him, saying Gondor has no king, Gondor needs no king. But then we have a moment, they fight alongside each other in Moria. They get to Lothlorien, and Boromir sort of shares some of his fears with Aragorn. Aragorn basically tells him at that moment that
yes, I would not take the ring within 100 leagues of your city.
Yeah, but Boromir gives sort of an impassioned plea for Aragorn to put more faith in the strength of men.
Yeah.
That men should not be given up on, that humans should not be given up on.
Yeah.
I keep saying men, but I mean, that's just how it's referred to in the books and movies. That the human race in general shouldn't be given up on. That there is strength there and courage also. And
yes, I mean, look at his city. How long have they fought against the forces of Mordor?
Yeah, and I don't think he would do that if he hadn't begun to believe that Aragorn was someone worthy in confiding these beliefs into.
Yeah, I agree.
So we get to see that growth there. And the fact that it ends with him on his deathbed saying, I would have followed you, my brother, my captain, my king.
It's amazing.
It's an arc that I don't think we fully get to appreciate
because we were always so focused on Boromir's just a bad dude.
Yes, the last several times I've watched the series, and every time I get to that scene, it always chokes me up. Boromir, you're such a good dude. I wish you were still around. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli could have used you throughout the entire journey that they go on.
They really could have. But going back to that arc, Aragorn has a similar arc. Yeah. Where, this is when he's like, Gondor has no king. Gondor needs no king. And Legolas is like, this is Aragorn, son of Arathorn. Your allegiance. And, we go from Aragorn just sitting there, just like, not offering anything.
Telling Legolas to sit down and calm down.
Yeah, calm down. Like, I'm not king. I don't want to. Basically, his feelings are, I'm not king. I don't want to be king.
Yeah.
to telling him, I would not take the ring within 100 leagues of your city.
Yeah.
To when he's dying, basically promising him that I won't let the white city fall, nor our people fail.
Yeah.
That's the first time he addresses it as our people.
Yes.
And also with a promise to, I'm going to help them. You know, I'm going to do what I can.
Yeah. And I love that. That's probably the moment when I start to tear up, because Boromir recognizes the use, his specific use of our people. As he repeats it back to him, he says our people, and he takes pride in the fact that he's happy. You know, this person that he's grown to respect, that he sees the strength of, now has a glimmer of hope for his people, for the human race. He can die with a bit of comfort.
It's good growth. It's just showing developments like that. Or these are things that I didn't appreciate when I originally watched it, because I was there for more just the story, the action, a good way to escape. But the more you watch it, the more you get to dive more into all of it. And it's just something I never appreciated. You know, these little Gondor has no king, Gondor needs no king. I would have followed you, my brother, my captain, my king. And then Aragorn, I wouldn't take the ring within 100 leagues of your city. And I will not let our people fail. These completions of these little character arcs, they're just, it's so satisfying.
It's such clever writing, and just being able to lay the groundwork for that type of growth is very impressive to me.
Yeah.
And from a visual storytelling aspect, I love that Aragorn takes Boromir's bracers with him as he leaves.
And I had never caught that before.
Yeah.
Like, I thought he was just doing up his buttons. I don't know.
Just getting ready to leave.
Just getting ready to leave. I don't know.
He does it kind of casually.
He does.
But it's, when we're younger, we don't stop and recognize.
But you do see that he's kind of turning his wrist more so you can see what the bracers are.
Yeah.
I just never cared enough to really look.
Yeah. But I love that. You know, from a visual standpoint, we get to see he's taking a piece of Boromir with him. He's carrying him with him. Even though Boromir will never return to the white city, a piece of him will go back, and Aragorn is basically promised to do that. He will return. Yeah,
and so I feel like he's taken those as, like, you know, this is a sign of the promise I made.
And I love that. That's a detail and it's probably the first in terms of like taking up a mantle of responsibilities. That's another visual aspect of that. He's now taken up the mantle of responsibility of caring for the people of Gondor.
Absolutely.
Even though he hasn't taken up the mantle of king, which is represented visually by the full Gondor armor that he wears at the end when they go to storm the Black Gate. You know, even though he hasn't done that yet, he's taken a piece. And I love that.
Okay, so we were just talking about the ring and how it was manipulating Boromir basically this whole time. I'd like to talk about the ring a little bit.
Okay.
Because, I mean, it's an entity, you know? It's basically a living force.
Yeah, it's not just a magic object. It has a will of its own. They literally say that.
Exactly.
It's not just an object. It
chooses when to leave a person.
Yes.
We've seen this with it leaving Gollum and Isildur. I mean, I don't know if we can say it left Bilbo, but Bilbo was able to get rid of it easily. So maybe it did choose at that moment that it was also done with Bilbo. And that's how Bilbo was able to make such an easy choice. Not easy, but
how Bilbo
nobody ever is able to get rid of it.
Yeah.
I would like to talk about when Bilbo does get rid of the ring. We see him take it out of his pocket as he's about to walk out the door, and he just drops it on the ground. And if you drop a piece of jewelry on the ground, it's just going to make like a soft little tinkling. You know, that's it.
Probably
you
like
might not
skitter
even
across
hear
the
it.
floor
Yeah,
under
exactly.
a cabinet, you know.
But and for the size of this ring, that's exactly what it should have done. It should have tinkled, maybe even spun a little bit, rolled off. But no, all we hear is this loud thunk, and it doesn't move. It stays still. Just this loud thunk. And I think it's significant because this ring, it's showing you basically it's heavy. It's full of power, and maybe it's lighter than it should be for how much power it holds, but it's heavier than it should be for the piece of jewelry that we see.
Exactly, for just a simple gold band. Yeah. Going
into that, when Frodo then walks in the door to Bag End, his eyes are drawn to this small, insignificant ring. If you were to drop a ring at the front of your door and I were to walk in, I guarantee I probably wouldn't see it.
Yep.
I'd probably walk right over it. I mean, he was headed to look for Bilbo. So his mind was on Bilbo. Where is Bilbo? But his eyes were drawn to this ring.
Yep.
Like the same way that when Deagle was in the water, his eyes were drawn to this ring through the murk of the water.
Yep.
Like no one would have saw that.
There's nothing natural about that.
No. And Bilbo putting his hand on the right exact spot in the dark.
Pitch black.
In pitch black. That shows me that the ring is already calling out to these people, you know?
Yeah. It has a level of manipulation over people that I don't think we fully appreciate. It can control how people's bodies react. We kind of covered that a little bit in the bit where Frodo was unable to put the ring into the fire and stuck it into his pocket instead.
Yep.
It does this constantly. It draws people's attention to itself.
And Gandalf even tells Frodo, you know, the ring wants to be found.
Yes.
That's the only way it can get back to his master is if it is found. It's fun to see visual representations of that in the movie, of how Frodo's eyes are immediately drawn to the ring. Deagle's eyes, or like hand, is basically drawn towards it in the murk of the water and the mud. And Bilbo puts his hand right on top of it. It's just a good visual representation of how powerful this ring is, but in a very small and subtle way. And also with the weight of it, when Gandalf casts it into Frodo's fire and then pulls it out again, and he says, "Hold out your hand, Frodo." It's quite cool. When the ring hit Frodo's hand does this little bounce thing where it bounces down and back up. I always thought, oh, it's a little hot. You know, he wasn't expecting that. But I'm beginning to believe his hand bounces down because of the unexpected weight of the ring.
Yep.
I know, these little things about the one ring showing how powerful it really is. Because, I mean, in reality, we're walking around with a piece of jewelry. Yep. So these little things that they do to show us that it's not just a simple piece of jewelry is amazing.
They do their best to express that the ring is not natural. There's nothing about it that's natural.
Yeah.
Especially its weight. Its weight is very significant. They do a really good job of trying to get that point across early in the story, because later in the story, the weight of the ring becomes sort of a twofold thing. Like it's physically very heavy, but it's also mentally very heavy for Frodo. Like it's
hard to show the mental like weight of it in a movie.
Yep.
But they do a good job, I think.
Yeah. With the physical weight, though, they're able to keep that portrayal up by showing like it actually digging into his flesh as it pulls on the chain that he wears it from.
And he's constantly moving the chain around and like rubbing around it.
And I think I always just sort of interpreted that when I was younger as just must be natural wear and tear from wearing a necklace for so long, because I was a child and didn't wear jewelry, very long, and he'd worn it for such a long time, and he hasn't been bathing, so maybe he's just got some bad skin.
He's exhausted, he's dehydrated. It's probably a lot from being in the sun, but
for going on such a long journey, for spending days, weeks, months with this thing around his neck whose weight most likely fluctuates.
Yes, I'm sure it does. It doesn't want to get thrown into Mount Doom.
And it probably gets even like its base level of weight probably gets heavier and heavier each step he takes to Mount Doom.
Remember when they're walking up, he's like, it's too heavy, you know? He literally can't take any more steps. And that's when Sam jumps in.
And I actually kind of love that, because for Frodo, he can feel the weight, but Sam can't.
Yeah.
He's carrying
Frodo, but he can't feel the weight of the ring.
Yeah. So the weight isn't necessarily something physical. Like it technically is from one angle, but it's more perception. The weight of the ring, as perceived by the person touching it, is immense.
Yeah.
It's that idea is kind of contradicted from the scene when they drop the ring and it clunks to the floor and doesn't move.
Yeah.
But I feel like that can just be explained away by it being powerful.
It's twofold. Like it's heavier than a normal piece of jewelry, but obviously it's not going to be so heavy that you can like it's going to weigh you down. But like you're the person carrying it, it probably is going to weigh you down, like
your perception of how heavy it is, especially after wearing it for so long and getting closer and closer to destroying it, your perception of how heavy it is going to you're going to perceive it as being incredibly, incredibly heavy. And that's what Frodo does. But I love the fact that Sam doesn't feel that weight as he's carrying Frodo.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're getting into the third book now, which we don't really want to do.
I guess we should backtrack.
Yeah, but I mean, the ring is it's such a fascinating plot device, because it's just an object, but it is a character in and of itself. It's a character that participates in scenes in almost a secondhand perspective, because every way it participates is through the manipulation of others, and we only see that manipulation through the actions.
And how many times do we even know if it's calling the shots on these characters?
Exactly.
How do we know that it's designed to go into Moria and it helps make these decisions? Frodo made the ultimate decision.
Mhm.
Maybe it was really the ring calling the shot.
It is a very, very clever piece of writing, and I feel like this style of villain is, I think, central to a lot of ideas about fantasy in general.
Yeah.
An evil presence that can't be fully locked down and defined, but is sort of always there and always present.
Yeah.
I mean, that all kind of circles back to Sauron, because the ring basically is Sauron. Sauron puts so much of himself into the ring. I have this theory.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure this isn't a unique theory. I don't think I came up with this before anyone else did. These books have been around for a long time.
Yes.
I'm sure everyone's kind of aware at this point that J.K. Rowling isn't this incredible, perfectly original author.
No, not at all.
And I'm sorry if this feels random and like I'm deviating, but trust me, I'm going to tie it in. I believe J.K. Rowling stole a concept from Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
And if you're fans of the books and movies, you probably see where I'm going. I believe she took the idea of a Horcrux from the One Ring.
Oh my gosh.
I think she took...
I never even thought about that before.
I think she took the idea of taking a piece of his soul and putting it into an object, and that object having a bit of personality and will of its own.
Yeah.
Of, relating to the original creator.
Well, let's think about like when Harry and Hermione have to share, what was that Horcrux? It was a necklace, right?
The necklace, the locket, yep.
Yeah, they had to take turns because of how it messed with their personalities and how they acted and how they felt. Does the ring not do the same thing?
The locket literally cuts into Harry's neck.
Oh my god.
It literally cuts into his neck.
She's over here stealing like
just straight up copying from one of the fathers of fantasy.
Hey, she got away with it.
It's blatant. Yeah, no, it's her IP. Anyway, yeah,
she stole the stories from her grandma anyway.
Yeah, it's true. That's a theory we can talk about another time. When we ever do an episode about Harry Potter, we'll most likely get into that.
Yes, you'll hear a grandma theory.
Yes.
That's a really good like connection though. Like, yeah. I never would have thought about that.
And I think thinking of it like a Horcrux is a great way for people who know about Harry Potter and want to understand more about Lord of the Rings. It's a great way for people to envision the ring. The ring.
She simplified it for them.
She did. It's very nice of her. That felt a little condescending to new people to Lord of the Rings.
Oh no, not for them.
Yeah, no. I mean, I can be as condescending as you want to J.K. Rowling. Who gives a shit? It's a very easy way. I think it's helped me personally envision the ring. I mean, I'll be honest. I grew up on the Harry Potter books, so everything in those is just ingrained in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
It was easier for me to start envisioning the ring as a Horcrux of Sauron. It feels a little bit silly, but Sauron was killed, but he didn't die because he still had a piece of his soul stuck in this object.
Exactly.
And so he persisted.
Yep. It's a Horcrux.
In a weaker,
100%.
In a weaker form, and he was able to, after years and years of isolation, build his power back up. But once this Horcrux was destroyed, his power was shattered, and he fell.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a very succinct way to envision what this object is.
Yeah.
I don't want to give any credit to J.K. Rowling just for this one little bit. Thank you for helping some of us visualize this this piece of fantasy that you've blatantly ripped off.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yes.
We all understand the ring a little bit better now.
Yeah, I appreciate it. The ring is basically a Horcrux.
But going off of that, you just talked about how, Sauron had to slowly build his power back up. I love the differences between the book and the movie Sauron. Like in the book, he's a being basically that's not able to leave his fortress of Barad-dûr. But in the movie, all he is the all-seeing eye.
Yep.
And I like it's a good representation because we can't really just keep going back to his fortress and seeing this man skulking around waiting for his people to bring back the ring. I mean, how boring and weird is that?
Yeah. From the perspective in the book, I think it's fine the way it is.
Works great.
Because
as a visual.
Yeah. The symbol of Sauron is his all-seeing eye.
Yeah.
Like that's the symbol he paints on the armor of his orcs.
Yeah.
And that's used as a reference to his power, the fact that he is all-seeing and all-knowing and stuff. Being able to take that and literally make him an all-seeing eye for the movies. I mean, there's something poetic about that.
Yeah.
But also it's just the perfect way to simplify and compact all of those ideas into one by literally making him an eye. Like he died, and so his power was changed, and he could only summon the strength to be this strangely morphed entity on top of a tower. They kept it true to the stories by showing him constrained to the tower. That the eye never left Barad-dûr.
Yep,
it was always there.
But that's a perfect way to, because if he did have like a physical presence, we would always be wondering like, why doesn't he just go find the ring himself?
Yeah,
we would have to take more time to explain he can't leave the tower. That's where the rest of his power resides. It just takes more time away from the story itself.
Yeah.
But as just the all-seeing eye, I mean, he's an eye. Of course he can't leave the tower, So it's just a good way to, I guess, save a little bit of time, but also have a really good visual at the same time.
Exactly. By that same token, the way he's described in the book as this menacing figure off in a tower who is bound to that tower, whose power is able to stretch even as far as the Shire, his presence. That's fine. That's great. That's terrifying, especially when we get in book 2, when we get a little bit from Gollum, and we actually find out that he does have a physical form, because he mentions seeing a hand with a ring, with a finger cut off. The fact that we get a bit of confirmation of that in the second book, it twists your guts a little bit. Like, oh snap, he's got a form. Like, he wasn't just like straight up killed. For those of us who come from the movies and just visualize him as this spiritual eye, flaming eye on top of a tower, it's crazy to imagine him having a body.
Yes.
Even in one that's just locked inside of a tower.
Yep.
I can appreciate it from that perspective as being something kind of new for me, going back to the books.
And that's where I think it's great for the books.
Yeah.
Because that point is able to be driven home and come across a lot more clearly than it would be in a movie. Those are the differences where it's really good in the book and it's really good in the movie, and I'm not mad at either one.
Yep. I think they're both great for what they are.
Exactly.
Yep.
Well, that brings us to the end of our Fellowship of the Ring discussion.
Yep. It was a bit of a long one. I hope you guys enjoyed.
I hope you were able to stick through. If anybody made it this far, thank you so much. And we hope to see you when we pick this back up.
Mom.
We probably won't follow the books like with episodes 1, 2, and 3. We'll probably be picking up a different book in our next episode, so stay tuned for that.
And if you just want to listen to our Lord of the Rings discussion, our Two Towers episode is still TBD. So go ahead and follow us on social medias for whenever we update when that one's going to be coming out.
So you can find us on Facebook, and we will be posting regular updates about the episodes that will be coming out.
Yes. All right, guys. Thank you for listening.